Hello and welcome to this webinar on preparing for month 13, the end of the sponsorship year. My name is Luciano. I am the resettlement educator at ORAT, Office for Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto. This session is intended to provide information for sponsor groups and individuals who are preparing their sponsored newcomer for the transition to the end of the sponsorship year, which is month 13 after the end of the sponsorship period. And so this presentation is intended to provide you with some information and tools to assist you to organize and prepare yourself in collaboration and conjunction with the newcomer that you're sponsoring so that they can manage their affairs independently at the end of the sponsorship year. And so I will be speaking about when sponsors should begin to prepare for the transition to month 13, which would be the end of the sponsorship year. I will also speak about what those conversations should be as the sponsors begin to prepare the newcomers for this transitional period to the end of the sponsorship year. And I will also identify some of the services which are very critical that newcomers should be made aware of as they prepare for the transition to self-sufficiency and independence at the end of their sponsorship year. And lastly, but not least, we would like it very much that sponsors evaluate and assess the sponsorship that they have undertaken to identify any gaps which could be rectified or improved for future sponsorships, as well as also to have a conversation with their sponsored newcomer to see if there's any feedback that could be provided by including them in those conversations to ensure that future sponsorships can be properly done and with improvements through such feedback. And so when should sponsor groups or individuals begin to prepare for the post-sponsorship period or the period after the end of the sponsorship year? Uh, Generally, the preparation to begin the transition for self-sufficiency and independence of the newcomers should begin in earnest from the very day that the newcomer arrives in Canada. But more so, we would strongly advise that sponsors begin the preparations for the transition to the end of the sponsorship year as early as the 9th month of the sponsorship year. So we believe that by the time the 9 months come about, most of the necessary foundational documents and services that the newcomers would need to independently conduct their own affairs and to participate meaningfully in their settlement would have been obtained already. And so if at that point um, those supports are in place, that would be the time we would ask that the sponsor group or the individual who is the co-sponsor to the refugee should begin the conversation about the transition to um, the end of the sponsorship year, which would be about 3 months from that point. And at the beginning of the month 9 of these conversations to the end of the sponsorship, we advise that the sponsors undertake and conduct a needs assessment, which should be conducted in conjunction with the newcomer or the newcomers. This is to ensure that they part of those discussions in terms of what their needs might look like post the end of the sponsorship period. And also, this would also help to identify any unmet needs which would need to be catered for during this time before the end of the sponsorship year. So it's very critical that the newcomer is involved in these discussions and conversations, as well as also comprehensive needs assessment should be done to make sure that the transition is smooth and also collaborative with the newcomer who is involved in this period. Further, we would indicate that in considering these discussions as the sponsorship period comes to an end, the sponsor should undertake an evaluation of the sponsorship period, including their own experiences as the sponsor groups, especially in this case for constituent groups or church groups that are sponsoring Project Hope cases. This would be a good time to assess their experiences in general, as well as also those of the refugees or the newcomers that they've sponsored, to ensure that if there's anything that could have been done better can be identified and such information shared with uh, the Office for Refugees representatives of the outreach team, so that further supports can be identified and such situations rectified in the future. Additional also, the settlement needs of the newcomer before the sponsorship period comes to an end, as I indicated previously, should be looked into to see if there are any gaps that are missing, so that those can be looked into and addressed before the sponsorship year comes to an end. And the sponsors also relationship with the newcomers in the post-sponsorship period or after the end of their sponsorship should be discussed in terms of how will the sponsor group or the co-sponsors interact with their sponsored newcomers at the end of their sponsorship year. As you know, the sponsorship obligation legally is 12 months. However, after the end of the sponsorship year, there are no legal obligations that would require for the sponsors to be fully involved in the lives of the newcomers they've sponsored. But as a moral duty, it would not seem right to abandon the newcomers at the end of their sponsorship year simply like that and cut those ties. So therefore, it's important that we identify ways in which we can continue those relationships, be it in a manner that is respectful of the independence of the newcomers at the end of their sponsorship year, but at the same time, while providing a supportive role and guidance for the newcomers in aspects of things which may not yet be clear to them at that point. And so those relationships needs to be established in advance so that the newcomers understand how they are going to interact and relate with their sponsors at the end of their sponsorship year. Now, as part of the process of assessing the needs and evaluating the sponsorship, sponsor groups needs to answer some of the following questions in a manner that would be comprehensive to enable them to determine any gaps that they may need to address during this time. And so part of it would be to understand whether their goals that they had established at the beginning of the undertaking of the sponsorship, whether they've been met, and if not, how those goals could be addressed, the gaps that have not been met. And equally, it would be good also to know if there were any successes achieved and how that was achieved, so that those lessons learned can be passed on to other groups who may be considering to be involved in efforts to help in the resettlement of refugees, or perhaps new groups, church groups that are looking to glean on the experiences of such refugee committees that have participated in settling successfully refugees before. So such lessons could be very crucial and can be shared with um, the Office of the Refugees, as well as also amongst the group members, so that they know what to do in future. Um, Obviously, in any settlement, there could be some challenges or drawbacks. We would also ask that those be identified and solutions be suggested in terms of how to overcome those kind of challenges. Once these have been identified and the expectations that were set forth, whether they were realistic or not, um, then it would lead automatically to an understanding as to whether the needs of the newcomers are being met. And an indicator of that would be to find out whether the newcomers um, have established a sense of self-sufficiency. By that would mean whether the newcomers are able to manage their affairs without necessarily depending entirely on the ongoing support um, of their sponsors. This could be would look at primarily aspects of financial independence, whether the newcomers have gained employment to earn some income where they can be able to provide for their day-to-day expenses and needs. It could be by way of the newcomers taking steps actively to either improve their language skills or to undergo further training, or to seek employment and access to other services that are available to them through the existing channels that are provided for by the government of Canada through the settlement agencies, and many other things which can be considered as part of the journey to self-independence. And so if this has been done, then the sponsor groups can also see whether there are any actions that they can take to move the newcomers towards self-sufficiency within the time frame that is left before the end of their sponsorship year, by redoubling their efforts. If that has not been the case, that would help the newcomer to quicken their efforts to begin to stand on their own 2 feet and to begin supporting themselves while benefiting from the presence of the sponsor groups, volunteers who can assist them in that journey. Last but not least, based on the experiences of the sponsoring group and the co-sponsors from the sponsorship about to end, it would help to glean as to whether it is something that would encourage the sponsoring group to help another family again. And that would be very helpful, especially for the Office for Refugees outreach team to know if we can count on the sponsoring group to assist us in settling other refugees that I need who currently do not have groups to help in their settlement. Now, after having these evaluations and assessments done in collaboration with the newcomers, we would ask that information should be communicated to the newcomer. In fact, as early before even the sponsorship year ends. In fact, communication can begin as early as the time of arrival of the newcomer, whereby the newcomer is clearly informed about the period of the sponsorship, which is 12 months, 1 year. That is 1 year, which is the equivalent of 12 months. And that at the end of the 12 months of the sponsorship year, that their sponsor group is not obligated to provide financial and or settlement support beyond the 12 months that are legally mandated for their settlement. And this information should be communicated as clearly as possible to the newcomers to ensure that the newcomers are aware of the exact date when their sponsorship period ends, so as to prepare them for the eventuality of a time when they need to be able to manage their own affairs without the need for their sponsor groups to step in. Um, some of the primary things that need to be communicated to the newcomers include access to affordable housing. If the newcomers have not yet considered the possibility of staying um, in their existing permanent accommodation, or if they're considering moving out, perhaps to begin arrangements to prepare for them to seek permanent housing in a location that they can afford. This can also include providing them information on access to subsidized housing and how to apply, perhaps with the support of a settlement worker where the newcomer has registered with a settlement agency, so that they can receive services there to assist them in accessing subsidized housing. Discussions about their budget, their funds, and how those funds will be, they will be able to manage those funds, and an understanding of how they need to take over the role of paying their bills, including rent, if currently that arrangement is one which is being undertaken by their sponsor group or co-sponsor. The newcomer needs to be prepared to begin to know how to undertake um, such an effort, so that they know exactly how they can pay their bills, whether it is for rent or for their utilities or their phone, internet, and so on and so forth. And in the unlikely situation that the newcomer perhaps is unable to um, secure a job to gain an income or meaningful employment at the end of their sponsorship year, conversations about available government supports, such as social assistance, and the criteria in order to qualify for those services need to also to be discussed with the newcomer, so that they can understand what it takes in order to qualify for those kind of services. Um, Other conversations to be had should include also filing taxes, how the newcomers can file their taxes, where to access those services, the free tax clinics that are provided through community um, agencies, organizations that can assist them in that regard, and when to do so, and what sort of documents they need to compile to assist them in that regard. Um, Furthermore, access to the local settlement agencies in the area where the newcomer will be residing should be discussed and made known to the newcomer, so that they can be introduced to their settlement worker to assist them in the transition. Um, Besides that, also with regard to matters related to health, wherein a family doctor has been secured for the newcomer, the newcomers should also be informed about any changes to their health care coverage, especially with the interim federal health plan, IFH, which is a 1-year health coverage from the federal government, supplementary health coverage from the federal government, with the exception of mental health services, whereby the newcomer, if registered under the interim federal health plan, can be covered into their second year after the end of the sponsorship year. But for general health coverage, the newcomers need to know that they will rely solely on the Ontario Health Insurance Plan for newcomers who reside in Ontario, especially those sponsored by the Office for Refugees within the Greater Toronto Area and region. And of course, if the newcomers move to another location from their current permanent residence, then a change in their mailing address also need to be undertaken by the sponsor group to ensure that their address is updated for the health card. Additionally, also other things that need to be discussed include educational programs and subsidies that are provided if the newcomers have children who are registered in school, or if the adults who are undertaking English language classes, whether ESL or LINK or other similar services to upgrade their professional credentials, that need to be discussed as well, whether the children will need to be transferred to a new school, how to register, all of that need to be factored in those conversations with regard to the end of the sponsorship year. And as well, the newcomers need to know how and when they can contact emergency services should the need arise for them to access emergency services, such as maybe medical emergency, or if it is a situation of fire, or criminal activity, how to be able to reach out to authorities so that they can be supported in those situations. The Office for Refugees also has made available to sponsors and newcomers resources which are available on our website. We have a constituent group handbook, which provides a plethora of best practices, which sponsors can access in order to guide them in various scenarios that they can also utilize to see what gaps exist that they can fill out. Additionally, also, we have a sponsor resource toolbox, which is a set of practical services and resources within the communities where the newcomers settle, which are accessible to sponsors who enable them to facilitate ongoing efforts for the newcomers to access services. And this is a tool which is freely available, developed by our office to support the newcomers and their sponsors in this transition to the end of the sponsorship year. And so you can go to our website and download these documents or these tools to assist you with the transition of your newcomer to the end of their sponsorship year. These resources are on our website at www.orat.ca. So www.orat.ca, and you can go to the resource tab on our website where you can obtain and download these handbooks, which are very, very helpful and very practical in terms of access to services. Once that has been undertaken, then the next thing should be a conversation that the sponsors and the sponsor groups, whether it's the parish groups or co-sponsor individuals, to have discussions as to what to do with newcomers who may not be self-sufficient. at the end or as they near towards the end of their sponsorship year, if they have not yet secured a job, have no income, what to do with such newcomers. We would ask that in those situations, sponsors should connect such newcomers with a settlement worker or one of the local Ontario Works office to guide them in terms of the requirements on how a newcomer who is not employed and is in need can apply for Ontario Works. Generally, newcomers who are sponsored can begin to apply for the Ontario Works at the start of their month 12, so the final month of their sponsorship year, if they at that point have not secured employment or are not financially self-sufficient. That would be the point to introduce them to a settlement worker so that those conversations can be had in terms of qualification requirements for the program and assessment of their assets and any other things that could be provided to them to ensure that they have access to support continued after the end of their 12-month sponsorship year. Applications for Ontario Works can be conducted either online or in person or over the phone with the local Ontario Works offices. And we definitely strongly encourage that the sponsor get in touch with the local Ontario Works office to have those conversations in advance so that the newcomer is aware of what to expect and how that process would unfold. As it is the case generally, sponsors should ensure that the newcomers will be able to receive their first social assistance payment at the end of month 12 or the end of their sponsorship year, so that they're able to cover their rent for month 13, as well as pay for any groceries or other bills that they may need to cover at the end of the month 12. So that's the reason why they need to approach the local Ontario Works office to discuss these things in advance before month 12 comes around. And additional details also can be accessed from the website of the Government of Ontario, which is listed here below, which you can also visit in your own time to research and find out a bit more. Now, we have developed in place a planning checklist which sponsors should use to assist them, to guide them to identify the various things that they need to check off before month 13 comes around. And this tool lists all the very, very important aspects that the newcomer needs to be assessed for and to ensure that those things are in place, or if not in place, arrangements made to assist the newcomer to transition to the end of their sponsorship year, which is month 13. The planning list has key information which needs to be communicated to the newcomers, ensuring that they have all the necessary skills, knowledge, and access to services post their sponsorship year. And this also is important so that the sponsors who are involved in this process of settling the newcomers do not feel disheartened or discouraged if they're newcomer by the time their sponsorship year is coming to an end, have not become self-sufficient or are not in a position to provide financially for their needs by the end of month 12. We do understand that the the process of integration is it's a journey, it's a process, it's not something that can occur instantly. And so if by the end of the first year of the sponsorship period, the newcomer is not self-sufficient, um, sponsors should not be discouraged by that. Perhaps some newcomers take a bit longer to fully understand the realities of settlement and also the steps they need to take in order to fully be able to integrate themselves. And so um, in situations where the newcomer is not financially self-sufficient at that point, we encourage the sponsor groups to find ways um, to, to help the newcomer to access supports, um, and also to assist them to begin to take steps to achieve self-sufficiency, whether that is to help them to look for employment or to see how they might be able to manage beyond the end of their sponsorship year. So some of the things to consider, first and most important, should be housing. Make sure that the newcomer has a place at the end of their sponsorship year where they'll be able to stay and can be able to sustain paying for the rent amount for that unit. Or if they decide that they want to move out of their existing accommodation to a different location, maybe slightly cheaper, then we encourage the sponsors to work with the newcomer to assist them in making those arrangements so that the newcomers know when and how they can rent a new place, how they pay their rent and household related bills, whether it is utilities, hydro, the internet cable or the phone, and how to transfer those to the new location, as well as also to help the newcomers to understand terms of the contracts related to rental agreements that they may enter into for their new lease. Or if they are continuing the existing lease, then to help them to transfer the lease into their name if currently the lease has the church group as a co-signer to the lease, so that that can be transferred into the name of the newcomer who will be the tenant living in the existing accommodation. So all of these have to be discussed with the group as well as the newcomer so that they are fully aware. The other aspect is to ensure that before the end of the sponsorship year, the newcomer has all the requisite primary documents that they need to have to have in their possession. So all of that includes documents related to their permanent resident card that they have obtained it, that they have applied for the Canada Child Benefits if they have children, or they filed taxes where they would be entitled to the goods and sales tax or the harmonized sales tax rebates, which are part of the benefits from filing their taxes, to ensure that any other documents that the newcomers have or need have actually been secured for them, whether it is a social insurance number or their Ontario Health Insurance Plan, or if they needed to apply for a driver's license or a library card, or their permanent resident card that it has actually been mailed to them and they have it. So all of that needs to be looked into. Additional also, if the newcomers decide to move to another location from their current permanent address, then the sponsors need to help them to change their address with the different government agencies that they have registered with, so that also those documents, um, those changes reflect the change in address in those documents as well, whether it is the health card, a driver's license, um, and so on and so forth. The other aspect is employment. Obviously, that is critical because the newcomers' self-sufficiency will depend on whether they're able to secure employment, which will assist them to finance their needs after the end of their sponsorship year, month 13. Um, in the event that the newcomers are not aware as to how to get employment, maybe sponsors should assist them to connect them with the settlement agencies where an employment counselor can assess their skills and to be able to help them to apply for various opportunities that are available, including survival jobs, which would help them to earn an income and be able to support their needs. For those that have certain qualifications or credentials that they came with from their countries of origin, if they need to access bridging courses or programs or vocational training opportunities, they should be assisted to help them to access that. Or for those who have professional qualifications, perhaps to help them to register for licensing requirements so that they can meet those um, qualifications in order to get into their profession or a vocation, as well as also helping them to understand their rights as an employee, or if they choose to begin their own businesses, how to be able to do that. So to help them to access those services. So it's important to discuss these issues with the newcomers in an ongoing basis. Of course, the management of their finances is critical. The sponsor group needs to sit down with the newcomer to review their budget and also to review any savings that they might have or income they're earning from employment, so that they can develop a proper budget which they will be able to follow and utilize post the end of their sponsorship year, and to help prepare them to manage those finances meaningfully in a way that they will be able to sustain themselves after their sponsorship period comes to an end, where they're no longer receiving financial support from their sponsor. I talked about health previously, so definitely it's important that the newcomers have been registered with a family doctor or have a family doctor. If there's no family doctor that has been secured, at least the newcomers need to be able to know how to be able to access health services from the hospital, the nearest hospital to them, or walk-in clinics, or community health centers where they can be able to go and seek medical services. Um, and also for newcomers who have children, who help ensure that all their children have received the relevant information on vaccinations, so that where they decide to have the children attend school, those would not be issues that would become a concern. For newcomers who have a need for mental health services or counseling support, appropriate referrals should be arranged for, so that they can have access to those services even after the end of their sponsorship year. And for newcomers who have ongoing medical needs, arrangements should be made to ensure that those ongoing medical needs can be addressed even after the end of their sponsorship year, um, and that the newcomers can follow a regime to ensure that supports will continue to be provided to them even when they are on their own. And access to emergency health, as I indicated previously, also they need to know how to do so in case of emergency, dental care, so that they can be able to be provided for that. And with the end of the interim federal health plan, insurance plan for supplementary coverage for newcomers who need additional mental health services, there is a need to ensure that they are registered with the interim federal health plan, so that coverage can continue beyond after month 12 with the federal government, and to ensure that they know also what entitlements they have with regard to their existing provincial health insurance plans. Education, also continuity is important. If the newcomers choose to pursue further education, whether it is language classes or enrolling in school, or pursuing further studies at a college or university level, all of these arrangements should be discussed with the newcomers to ensure that they are in place and the newcomers know how to move forward, or to be able to ask for help from the sponsor groups before the end of their sponsorship year. As well, language classes, as this is critical because at a point when the newcomers um, would like to transition from permanent residents to become Canadian citizens, they will be required to provide proof of their language class certificates and the levels attained in order to apply for Canadian citizenship. So it's critical that if at this point the newcomers have not yet attended language classes, that they do so that they can be able to obtain and be issued the language class certificates, which will help them in future when they qualify to apply to become Canadian citizens. Social services, ongoing access to social services should also be included as part of the discussions, because this would be an ongoing service which the newcomers can access even after the end of their sponsorship period. They can be able to still go and access these services as permanent residents, be it with the settlement agency that they are registered with, or new settlement agencies that they are um, going to be accessing in the new location where they have moved to. The ability to move around and to find your way in the community should be clearly discussed as well, to ensure that the newcomers are comfortable to be able to travel on their own. They know how to use public transportation or public transit, and how to load or upload their transit passes, whether it's Presto or another such cards, monthly passes that they use for traveling. And as well as also if they have any other mobility needs, to discuss those and to see where they can receive support for such mobility access. For newcomers who may have challenges with language, perhaps arrangements can be done to ensure that they know how to access interpretation services in community agencies or settlement agencies that provide such services, so that they can be able to go and access services, or if they go for their appointments, they have someone to assist them with translation and interpretation. Um, Last but not least, also the newcomers should be provided a comprehensive orientation about the community in which they have settled, so that they know how to interact and participate fully actively in their community as active members of that community, how to get around, how to be able to shop for groceries and participate in other community sporting activities or community meetings or any other resource centers that are in the community, so that the newcomers know how to be able to access those. So an orientation to help them in that regard would be very helpful. Now, having considered all those areas, it's important for the newcomers and their sponsors uh, to establish some parameters in which they will be conducting their interactions post the sponsorship period, And these relations must be clearly defined so that the newcomers know um, the boundaries, as well as their sponsors also know the boundaries in respect of um, the newcomers self independence, as well as privacy. So the role of the sponsor group or the constituent group is to assist the newcomer primarily to gain self-sufficiency and independence, and to be in a very supportive role throughout the settlement period, while providing ample opportunities for the newcomers to be able to participate and to engage fully in their settlement and integration process. It's important for the sponsors to understand that if the newcomers, by the end of the sponsorship period, which is the 12 months, if they are not yet financially self-sufficient or are not able to manage their affairs, that perhaps the process of integration is different for different newcomers, depending on the situation where you find them at that point in time. And so sponsors should not be disheartened by it, but rather um, strive to encourage and to continue to encourage the newcomers to keep trying the best that they can, perhaps into the second or third or fourth year um, would be the time when the newcomers might be able to find their footing and to become self-sufficient. Um, in terms of the legal obligations, the financial support that newcomers receive from their sponsors after the sponsorship period has ended, um, there is no further financial support that would be provided, as legally that is no longer possible. And ORAT strongly discourages any further support after the end of the sponsorship year, as this may affect any financial assistance that the newcomers may seek to receive from the government if they choose to apply for social assistance, as that is determined on the basis of the existing resources that the newcomers have. Additionally, um, any financial assistance that would be provided at the end of the sponsorship year um, is required to be directed to the sponsorship and the support of additional refugees that ORAT would like to settle due to the limited resources. Therefore, we discourage any further sponsorship financial support to newcomers at the end of their sponsorship year. Um, Generally, sponsor groups can continue to provide emotional support and friendship with their newcomer after the end of their sponsorship year. This is at their discretion, of course, but we do believe that having developed those relations with the newcomers that they have sponsored, um, ongoing emotional and friendship is something which they can continue to provide as needed by the newcomer. And the newcomer can equally say no to any further help or support if they so choose um, not to undertake any support from their sponsors without any repercussion. This is their prerogative. After the end of the sponsorship year, we do understand that some newcomers may prefer to have their privacy, and so that sort of relationship can be defined in advance as well, so that those parameters are clearly defined. Um, Newcomers also need to know that they can approach their sponsor group members or their sponsors even after the end of their sponsorship period for any guidance or to seek any support in terms of any issues that they may not understand or that they need clarification on. Sponsor group volunteers will always be available to assist them in that regard in any situation. And we definitely encourage, where possible, continued conversation among the sponsors and the newcomers throughout this period of transition, to help the newcomers to manage their expectations beyond the sponsorship year. In that way, helping set a strong foundation for the newcomers to transition after the end of their sponsorship period. There are other supports that are available beyond what ORAT can provide, including the Refugee Sponsorship Training Programs Month 13, Frequently Asked Questions, and the Month 13 Planning Resources Kit, which is available from the website of the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program, RSTP, which is www.rstp.ca, which can be downloaded. Also, our staff from the outreach team at ORAT can be contacted anytime during and after the end of the sponsorship period by either email at oratoutreach@archtoronto.org, or you can reach us by phone at 647-494-5419 to seek any support, be it from the sponsor group or co-sponsors, or by the newcomers if they have any thing that they would like to discuss with our office. Our outreach team is available to provide assistance in that regard. So this concludes this presentation. I want to thank you all for your support and efforts towards assisting the newcomers in their transition to self-sufficiency at the end of their sponsorship year, month 13, and also for your continued moral and emotional support to the newcomers even beyond the end of their sponsorship year. We wish the newcomers a good and successful transition to the end of their sponsorship year. God bless.